generally there was three issues with the election. The first was, you mentioned Microsoft. They operate on both sides of the aisle. Facebook offered their services to help make the most of their advertising platform to both sides. The Clinton campaign wasn't interested. They didn't want to spend that much on Facebook. They didn't care to learn how to use it effectively. And they turned down the offer of embedded Facebook employees who would be Democrats. Facebook offered to put Democrats in the Democratic campaign and Republicans in the Republican campaign. And the Republicans, run by this smart guy named Brad Parscale, they said, yeah, give us all of it. And they spent a fortune on Facebook. That was the center of their campaign. And they played Facebook platform like a Stradivarius. And the people at Facebook were in awe at how well they used the platform. And they weren't too bothered by it, even if they were liberals, because they figured, there's no way that Trump's going to win anyway. So that's problem one.
No, you write nicely about that. That all big companies deal with these issues where they've got their government affairs and they've got people from each side, given the two sides of the aisle, if you will, in the U.S. They didn't want to be seen, you suggest, as being, pro one side or the other, and so they had a very high level.
But problem two is what became known as fake news. So, the false articles. So the way Facebook, the news feed works, is the sensational stuff gets more traction than just boring true stuff. And so people figured out that if you post fallacious content and maybe even pretend that it came from a reliable source, it's going to percolate wildly on the system. And most of it came from people trying to make money. And they figured out that for some reason, conservatives would engage more with this kind of content than liberals would. So, for instance, there was an article that came from the so-called Denver Guardian about an FBI agent was murdered who was looking into Hillary's emails. Totally not true. And the Denver Guardian was totally not true. There was no publication.
There is no Denver Guardian.
They gave their address. It was a parking lot in Denver, and that particular post, had about 40 times, some much more engagement than the giant New York Times investigation of Trump's finances. And a lot of it came from Macedonia, and they would monetize it. You click on that page, and they would get the ads. And then there was the third part, which was Russian involvement, because the Russians took advantage of the Facebook platform to run a disinformation campaign. Now, Facebook knew about problem two, the fake news. And they couldn't miss it because it became an issue during the last few weeks of the campaign. Obama was talking about it and telling Facebook to do something about it during campaign stops for Hillary. But when they took meetings on it, and I write about one meeting in particular, they said, and the big mover in this conversation was the head of Facebook's Washington office, who was a lifelong Democrat, who some people around him, working around him, told me that he felt his job was to protect the Republicans. He said, we're going to leave it alone because we don't want to put our finger on the scale, and besides, the conservatives would say we're trying to tilt the election, towards Hillary. Actually, it was a tilted playing field because of that fake news, and by doing something about it, they would be leveling it. But they did nothing.